how to be psychologically competent. And first of all, let's get a definition of this word competent, because this is a term that is often used in relatively, but there is a definition for it. And the definition makes it relative. It says refers to an individual's ability to effectively understand, manage, and respond to their own emotions and the emotions of others in a way that promotes well-being and positive outcomes. Now, that is the definition of psychologically competent, not just the word competent. And that is, again, there's some words in there that are relative terms. They're subjective. Effectively is a subjective term. Understanding can be even used subjectively. And in a way that promotes well-being and positive outcomes is a heavily subjective frame. So this is a very subjective thing. I'm going to try to explain it to you as objectively as possible, this subjective term. All right, if everybody's following what I'm saying here. So actually, there's more to this definition. I'm going to give you the other part. It involves being mentally and emotionally equipped to handle a variety of situations, challenges, and interpersonal interactions with resilience, clarity, and empathy. Okay, so this is an extremely subjective term, but we're going to tackle it here today. Now, I don't even remember where I first heard the phrase psychological competence, but being that I talk about competency, especially for those of you who are at the professional level at what you do, I talk about competency all the time. When I say professional, I was talking to someone, who was I speaking to the other day? I think I was talking to a friend of mine, I think, and I used the word professional, and she responded to it in such a way to say, well, what about entrepreneurs? And when I say professional, just to be clear with everyone, I don't necessarily mean professional meaning you work in, you are in an employee situation where you are employed. When I say professional, I just mean someone who does something as their main paid occupation, which encompasses entrepreneurs. That could be someone who's working, climbing the corporate ladder. That can mean a school teacher. It can mean a stripper. It can mean a drug dealer. When I say professional, it just means whatever you do, is done as your main paid occupation, which is actually the dictionary definition of the word. But colloquially, sometimes people hear professional and they think that means somebody who has a job. I mean entrepreneurs also, employees, athletes, contractors, everybody. Okay, so it's important that we talk about the psychological aspect of competence, as well as the physical and tangible aspects, which we talk about all the time. Competence, if you're playing basketball, one of the core competencies of basketball is you can make a layup. Another core competency is you understand the spacing on the floor, you know how to run plays, etc. One of the core competencies of being an entrepreneur is you got to be able to sell. All right, so now today, what we're going to talk about are the psychological competencies when it comes to just psychological competence, that definition that I gave you already. So again, just to go over some highlights of that definition: understanding, managing, and responding to your emotions and the emotions of others in a positive that leads to a positive outcome. And again, being mentally and emotionally equipped to handle different things using resilience, clarity, and empathy. That's the topic here today. Point number one. Topic again is how to be psychologically competent. Number one, get and remain focused on the task at hand while ignoring and avoiding distractions. I prefer ignoring distractions or just eliminating distractions, because think about a distraction. I would often get this question. I used to get the question a lot more than I do now. I don't know why, but back in maybe 2016, 17, I would get a lot of people asking me, Dre, how do I avoid distractions? People would ask me that a lot back then. Again, I don't know why fewer people ask it now. Maybe so many people have tackled the subject. And my answer to that is that you're asking the wrong question. All right. In life, you don't want to focus on negating the thing that you don't want. So when you say avoid distraction, it's like saying don't fall up the steps. All right, you're trying to negate the thing that you don't want. Instead, you want to, or it's like if you're playing basketball, you say don't miss the layup. All right, that's not what you want. Instead, you want to put your focus, because the subconscious mind takes things literally. You want to put your focus on the thing you do want rather than the focus on the thing you don't want, rather than trying to negate the thing you don't want, which is extra work for your brain anyway, because it has to process what you say and then say, okay, don't do that. But you're not giving anything to do. So you're creating a vacuum just by your own verbiage. So instead of trying to not miss the layup, instead say make the layup. Instead of saying don't fall up the steps, say walk up the steps confidently and with full composure. Instead of saying how do I avoid distractions, instead you want to say how do I find my focus. Now you see, you end up in the same place either way, but you're giving your subconscious mind a more clear direction because you're actually giving it a thing to do rather than a thing to not do. If you tell someone to not do something, you're still leaving them the possibilities of the million other things that they still could do because you only negated one. What about everything else? Instead, focus on the thing that you want them to do. This leads to more clarity, more decisiveness, and a higher likelihood that whatever you told yourself to do actually happens. So when I say get and remain focused on the task at hand, that's really what you should focus on here is what is the task at hand and just stay focused on that. And when you're doing that, you automatically, as a byproduct, are not noticing distractions. So you don't even have to try to ignore them or try to avoid them. You see, you only have to ignore something if you know that it exists. Like if you're trying to ignore a thing, that means you know that it's there, but you're not going to pay attention to it. It's kind of like if you're out in public and you see somebody staring at you, and for whatever reason you don't want to look at them or you don't want to acknowledge them. I know ladies, sometimes you all do this when you're out in public. There's a man looking at you and you really want to talk to that man and you don't want to get a man an opening to think he should talk to you. So you know that he's there, but you ignore making eye contact with him so he doesn't get any openings or avoiding distractions. So it's like right now I'm recording and you would take whatever you're doing right now and hopefully you're doing some work if you're supposed to be working. A distraction could be you picking up your phone and scrolling through your email, text messages, or social media. Those are distractions. Your email, text messages, and social media are distractions when you're supposed to be working. But you don't have to avoid those distractions. All you got to do is focus on the thing you're supposed to be doing, and you automatically avoid it because you're not even going to it. Actually, you're not even avoiding it. You're just not doing it. See, you avoid something when you know it's there and you are actively doing things to stay away from it. Like my phone is within arm's reach of me right now. I could, if I wanted to, pick it up and start scrolling through my text messages, email, and social media while I'm talking to you. But I don't need to avoid doing that. I'm just not doing it. Why? Because I'm focused on the task at hand, which is talking to you and looking at this camera lens and or my notes while I'm speaking. So part of your competency, folks, is your ability to do the job that you're supposed to be doing regardless of what's happening around you. Let me repeat that statement. Part of your competency is your ability to do the job that you're supposed to be doing, regardless of what else is happening around you, i.e., the possible distractions. See, a distraction doesn't become a distraction until you are distracted by it. Right now, as I told you, I'm focused on speaking into this microphone and looking into the camera lens as I'm recording. A possible distraction is there's a big window to my right. You're watching this on video. You see the light shining through on me. There are cars driving by the road. There's a big parking lot. There's a billboard over there. There's a lot of things I could be distracted by if I decide to focus on them out of this window. I can pick up my phone and focus on that. I can look at things on my whiteboard that I can see in front of me. And my son's mini whiteboard, which is right below mine. I could focus on all these things and they would become distractions as soon as I start to focus on them. But as long as I stay focused on the task at hand, all of these other possibilities are not actual distractions because I'm not giving them any of my focus. A distraction does not become a distraction until you give it focus. If you ignore all the things that could possibly be distractions, then they can't be distractions. Again, distraction only occurs once you notice it and you acknowledge it. Don't acknowledge it's not a distraction. Okay, and also at the same time, focus is a force multiplier. And the thing that you're supposed to be doing is also known as your focus. And focus is a force multiplier. Episode 1193, we discuss this. The longer and stronger you can focus on anything, the better your returns that you get from that investment. Anything. Focus really hard on your finances, you'll do better with your money. Focus really hard on your fitness, you'll do better with your fitness. Focus really hard on your relationships, you'll do better in your relationships. Focus really hard on X, you will get better returns from X. Why? Because you are putting a higher percentage of your personal power into that thing. And you put more of your personal power into anything, you're probably going to do better at it. Regardless of your level of skill, just using more of your skill rather than less of your skill, you're probably going to get a better result. Right? Doesn't that make sense? So, if you focus on one specific job for a year straight, any job, you'll probably get a lot better at that job than if you were doing that along with 8 other jobs at the same time. You just put all your focus on one thing instead of trying to divide it amongst 8 things, you're probably going to do better at the one thing. So part of your psychological competency is how well you can stay focused on the task in front of you and not get distracted by other things that could possibly pull at your attention. And again, you can do this on a micro level, such as I said, recording the show instead of picking up my phone and checking email and text messages. Also can be on a macro level, such as not getting intrigued by some bright, shiny object that pulls you away from your main business. I read about business people all the time who, once they start to have some success in business and it becomes noted, at least in their space, that they're successful, other people will come around offering them other business opportunities that would pull them away from the main thing. And many of them have told stories of how they got pulled away from the main thing in their business and put some money into this other thing. And the other thing didn't really work out the way they thought it was going to work out. And they ended up having to cut their losses, or they took a loss, or it ended up hurting them in some way in business because they got distracted from the main thing that they should have been doing. In one of Donald Trump's business books, I heard him say this. I just got finished, as of the date that I'm recording this, I just got finished reading a book by a guy named Patrick Bet-David. Some of you may be familiar with him. And he was talking about, as he started to build, as he's in the insurance industry, as he started to build a successful insurance business, he started to have some money. And because of the money that he was making and the noted success that he had in his industry, people started coming around to him and offering him other opportunities. And he got distracted by an opportunity, put, I think it was $100,000, he said, into that opportunity. And because it wasn't one of his core areas of expertise, he didn't do his due diligence, didn't have the right information. And the thing that he went into ended up being a failure. And he had to basically cut his losses and take a loss financially because of that bad decision. It's the same thing that I want to make sure on a macro level, you understand this is another way that you can lose focus. So focus can be on the next 5 minutes. It can also be the next 5 years. Point number 2, today's topic, once again, is how to be psychologically competent. Number 2, find out what the most competent people are already doing and make sure you are capable of doing the same. What are the most psychologically competent people doing? And are you capable of doing the same thing? Now, this is with regards to your current area of focus or expertise. So this doesn't mean that if you're a basketball player, you need to go find out what software engineers are competent at. It means if you're a basketball player, you need to find out what other good basketball players are competent at. You should probably be good at that, whatever it is. So in basketball, for example, since I use that, and it's often noted, and this is what's told to us as youth players, not every player takes up the advice, but it's told to us as youth players that you can dribble with your right hand, you need to be able to dribble with your left hand. If you can make a layup with your right hand, let's say you're right-handed, then you need to be able to make a layup with your left hand. If you can play offense, you better be able to play defense. These are core competencies that everyone who's good at the game, they master these, also known as fundamentals. Core competencies are fundamentals as well. So in your current area of expertise, all right, do you understand what are the core competencies expected of high-level performers, and what are you doing to make sure that you meet each of those expectations? If you're a horseback rider, for example, again, you don't need to be a NASA astronaut, but you better know what makes a good horseback rider. And the same thing for the guy in NASA. You need to find out what the most competent people in your lane already understand, are executing on, or otherwise, and make sure that those things are also part of your skill set. So when I was developing as a basketball player, for example, I started noting what other players in my neighborhood could do that I could not do. And I made it my business to make sure I developed those abilities, because from what I could see in my myopic view, that the best players around here can do these things. I can't do those things, so I need to learn how to do those things so I can possibly align myself with these players who are better than me here in the neighborhood. Now, being that I'm right-handed, again, I just told you, coaches would often harp on players that you need to be able to do things with your left hand as well as your right hand, especially if you're a right-handed player. So I started to develop that competency to the point that I was really good with my left hand, and did a whole lot of, to this day, you can go on YouTube and find a lot of trainings of me doing things with my non-dominant left hand. But if you're a left-handed person, then your right hand will be that. And just showing players how to develop that non-dominant hand, to the point that a lot of players started to think that I might indeed be left-handed, because my left hand was almost, as a player, almost better than my right hand. So being that, continuing on basketball, I was relatively taller than many of my peers. Not like I'm super tall. I'm 6'4" to this day, but I was taller than a lot of my peers in my neighborhood. People started to ask when they would see me on the basketball court, "Can you dunk?" So probably about around the age of 13, I would get people saying, "Well, can you dunk?" Because they saw that I was tall. So by age 15, I could not yet dunk, at least not on a regular, consistent basis. But I added dunking to the list of things that I wanted to develop at. And by age 16, I was dunking with ease. And the reason I was able to do it is not because I just willed myself into jumping higher. I wish it was that simple. It was because I went and got a program that I saw being sold out of a magazine. This is back in the 90s, when you would send a money order to a address and they would mail you back a program. I got the program. It was called Air Alert. And I got that program. It was like a 15-week plyometrics program. And I did that program, and that's when my athleticism in basketball started to take off. I'm telling you that not for you to go buy the program. I'm telling you that because the core competency that I wanted to develop, I went and found someone who was already teaching it, and I learned from them, and I made a financial investment into getting that information. That's the reason why I'm sharing that with you. So fast forward to today. I noticed that many people who are in my lane or a parallel lane in business seem to be using things like artificial intelligence a lot. You've heard me talk about that a lot already here on the show. And they're using it either a lot or at least in some ways in their businesses. And I talk about artificial intelligence a lot because I have been using it and becoming more familiar with it. And I'm using it a lot more every single day, just looking for the different possibilities of how it can be used. So this is one area in which it pays to pay attention to what other people are doing. Now, I do not suggest you pay attention to what everybody else is doing in everything you do in life, because this can be extremely distracting and it can take you away from what you're supposed to be doing. And it's also a big time suck. However, when you're doing it strategically, you should pay attention to what other people are doing, because you can get little tidbits and nuggets that can be useful for you, if not something even bigger than that, a whole meal maybe, metaphorically speaking, when you're paying attention to other people. So as much as I tell you, don't pay so much attention to what everybody else is doing, I still read other people's books. I still listen to other people's shows. I still will listen to someone else's YouTube videos. I don't really watch YouTube as much as I listen to it. I still do those things because I want to know what's going on. I still talk to peers of mine who are also entrepreneurs in completely different industries to find out what they're doing, share with them what I'm doing, and we swap notes and swap ideas. Because again, that's the collaboration aspect that can absolutely help. So again, all the content you hear me put out here on the show is not because I'm sitting in the basement, evil genius, and these things just pop into my brain from nowhere. It's because I engage with other people, but I do so strategically, not randomly and recklessly. And you need to be doing the same thing. When you're paying attention to other people, do it in a strategic way that can serve you, not just sucking time away from you. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to be psychologically competent. Number 3, keep your sword and skills sharp, such that you never fall asleep at the wheel. Your sword meaning like knights and kings back in the day when they would fight each other with swords. That's what I'm going to say, sword. And your skills. Everybody knows what that word means. Another piece of your competency is simply staying good at the things that you're good at. Not getting good, staying good. How many of you know someone in your particular space who was good some time ago at the thing that they still do, but they have gotten worse? Their abilities have actually eroded and gotten worse. And usually that happens because people stop focusing on the job. They get distracted from the main thing and they start doing other things. They stop working on their games. So your game was good, but you stopped practicing, so your game got worse. Has any of you ever seen that? In the sports world, this is usually very obvious to tell when someone is simply not practicing anymore. They're still playing, but are you practicing? Are you showing up and doing what you're supposed to do to stay as sharp as you were? I've used the example of a guy named Ray Allen before, who lives down here in South Florida. And last I heard, he's actually coaching a high school basketball team. I think his kids are high school age. He's coaching a high school team down here in Miami. But Ray Allen is a guy that I use as an example because he was known as a very good outside shooter in basketball. Those of you who follow basketball, you know who Ray Allen is very well. I remember once I was walking to Whole Foods in downtown Miami, and I was walking up the steps, and there was a guy standing there. And he looked at me, and he did a double take, and he said that I looked like Ray Allen. He thought I was Ray Allen when I first walked up. Now, I I understand why the guy might have thought I was Ray Allen, because I'm about the same height as him, and we're both black, about similar complexion, and we both have bald heads. But other than that, I am much more physically attractive than Ray Allen. But anyway, just had to add that in. But anyway, Ray Allen was known for being what's the word that we would use here? People like to use ADHD, and I don't really like to throw that around because that's we'll throw it around because that's like a clinical diagnosis, but which I think is actually bullshit anyway. But he was known for being very ADHD, or what's the word? The word is escaping. The term that I want to use is escaping me, but we'll just use that term. So I think of a better one to replace it when it came to practicing. So he would get to the gym or the arena where the team was set to play. He would get there earlier than the early bus. So there's a bus that leaves the hotel to take the players to the gym. There are two buses, the early bus, the late bus. Ray Allen would get to the gym before the early bus. So he would take a taxi just to get to the gym early, just so he could get practicing before everybody else got practicing. And the point of me bringing all that up is to say obsessive compulsive is the word that I'm thinking, that the phrase that I was missing there a moment ago. And again, another clinical thing that's usually bullshit. But anyway, Ray Allen was known as being a great shooter and a very consistent great shooter. And one of the reasons why is because he never stopped sharpening the sword. He never allowed his knife to go dull because he never stopped working on his game. There are a lot of athletes, any of you who's in the athletic space, I know this happened a lot in basketball, but in other sports, you all have probably seen it as well if you're involved in other sports, players who are good and they're recognized for being good, but they stop working on their games and their game slowly erodes. Their skills slowly go away because they fall asleep at the wheel and they stop working on their games to the point that they are overtaken by other players. And then at that point, they either don't want to do the work anymore, they condition themselves to not do the work, or they just decide it's a lost cause to even try again, and then it's pretty much over for them. So staying good at things you're already good at and not losing your edge is part of your job. Staying good at things that you're good at and not losing your edge is part of your job. This very show right here. All right, people have asked me this all the time, and y'all have heard me talk about it. I do not record this show one episode every single day. I usually record in bulk to where I'll record several episodes in one day. For example, today I'm probably going to record 7 or 8, maybe I'll get to 7. I'll record at least 6 episodes of this show every single day. And right now, just to tell you where I'm at, the day that I'm recording this, I'm looking at, let's see, we're about 6 weeks ahead right now. So this episode that I'm recording right now, I recorded this from the date that it came out. I recorded this 6 weeks before you actually heard it. And I'm telling you that not to impress you, but to impress upon you that one of the reasons why I continue to record episodes of this show, even though I'm 40 plus episodes ahead of the scheduling process, is because I don't want to lose my edge when it comes to actually getting on this mic and speaking. I have gone times where I did go 2 or 3 weeks not recording because I had enough episodes sandbagged, and there was a reason why I did that. I did it because maybe I was on vacation, or I was traveling, or it was another project that needed my time and attention. But I didn't like doing that because when I came back, I wasn't as sharp when I started recording again as I had been when I had stopped. So I keep recording all the time on the show. At least once a week, I'm recording on the show, for this show rather, not on, but for this show, just so I can make sure I stay sharp. I don't want to lose my ability to get my points across through my verbiage. And I will if I stop recording. I already know it because I've felt it before. So you got to stay sharp at what you're doing. If you're a coach playing a sport, you got to stay sharp in terms of what's happening in your sport. How are plays being diagrammed? How are you breaking down film? Do you know what's going on in your industry? You got to stay sharp. And this applies to every industry, by the way. Again, we talked about this in episode number 2099. How to extend your prime years in anything. So any of you wants to extend your prime, y'all know what the prime means. That means like the years where your physical abilities and your mental abilities match and you're at your peak in both. How do you stay in that area for as long as possible? Listen to episode 2099 where I break it down. Again, your skill, whatever it is, should remain a skill for as long as you're using it. You shouldn't be getting worse while you're still in the game. There's no reason why you should be getting worse while you're still in the game. I mentioned basketball earlier here today. Michael Jordan was a guy, when he was playing, he was still very good when he stopped playing for the Chicago Bulls in 1998. All right, he left the game because the team didn't want to keep the core players around. Michael Jordan still wanted to play. He walked away because he didn't want to be in a rebuilding process with a bunch of players who hadn't won championships with him. But he was still at the top of his game, even into his mid to late 30s. I mean, he came back to play for the Washington Wizards many years later. He had actually injuries that slowed down his progress. And at that point, he was older, but he was still a pretty damn good player. There are many players, when they get older in playing sports, they tend to get worse. And one of the reasons is, yes, you have the physical decline, which is part of the deal when you're playing a sport. But also another reason is a lot of players just stop working on their games. They're not working on their games as much in year 10 as they were in year 1. And there are many reasons for this. Complacency, the success that you've already created, that people are looking at the door, they're looking at the exit more than they're looking at the entrance, and they just tend to tail off. This is happens. This is normal. This is just the normal evolution or de-evolution, for lack of a better term, that people have in any space. I'm suggesting that you go against the grain and not be like this. Keep getting better. You should not be getting worse while you're still in the game. So, for example, I often run into people. I just did the other day, actually yesterday, from when I'm recording this. I just ran a 10K yesterday in the Doral section of Miami. Came in first place in my age group, by the way. Thank you for the congratulations. And there was a guy who was working on the crew for the event. I believe his name was Carlos, and he told me he used to watch my YouTube videos back in the day, my basketball stuff. And often when I meet people who fit that description, they will ask me one of two questions. Carlos didn't ask me any questions, but there was a guy I met on the train actually like 2 weeks ago. He asked me one of these questions. One is, do you still play basketball at all? That's one of the questions I always get asked. Do you still play? Answer is, for all of you to know, no, I do not play basketball at all. I quit cold turkey in 2015. I've not played basketball since. The other question is, can I still dunk a basketball? If someone has a long enough conversation with me, they'll eventually ask that question. Can I still dunk a basketball? Now, that one I have not tried in a while. I have not tried to dunk a basketball since probably like 2020. And so I will say that answer is probably no, because if you don't keep dunking a basketball and keeping your jumping legs active, you're probably not going to be able to do it. So I wouldn't even try to dunk a basketball today because I probably tear something in one of my joints if I try to explode up off the ground when I know my body's not conditioned to do so. So these are okay for me. It's okay for me to not be able to dunk a basketball because I don't play basketball anymore. But if I was still playing and I couldn't get up there the way that I used to get up there, I might need to walk away from the game or develop other aspects of my game to make up for what I lost. Okay? But if I was still playing, that would be required. Now, since I'm not playing anymore, it's okay. Your goal is to stay as good as you have been, even if that means you need to compensate, again, for certain things eroding over time. In sports, this is an obvious erosion. So Michael Jordan, when he came back to the Wizards, even when he was still playing for the Bulls in the late 90s, he was no longer the guy who would just jump over everybody and run around everybody. He didn't have that athletic ability anymore. It slowly erodes over time. That's natural. But he made up for what he had lost athletically with other things. He made up for it with more skill. His outside shot was better, and he was still the best player in the game, even though the skills he used to be the best player in 1988 were different skills than what he used in 1998. He was still the best player. And one of the reasons for that, I don't know Michael Jordan personally, but I can guarantee you one of the reasons for that is that he was still dedicated to keeping his sword sharp in 1998 the same way he was dedicated to it in 1988. And that's very different from many people in any industry. And it's one of the reasons why when I mention Michael Jordan's name, I don't need to explain to you who he is, right? Because all you know who he is. Why you know who he is? Because of what he achieved. So your goal, again, stay as good as you've ever been, even if it means making up for something that you've lost. Again, in sports, this becomes obvious because not everybody's going to stay spry and fast and super athletic forever, but you can keep playing. So had I kept playing into my late 30s, I could probably still dunk a basketball because I never would have let the ability go away. But I wouldn't be as explosive, but I could still do it. So in that case, I would have developed other skills to again make up for what I had lost in athletic ability and explosiveness. So I would still be a very effective player, just effective in different ways. You need to continue being effective, even if it means effective in different ways based on not necessarily your losing of abilities, but let's just say things change over time. So let's say it used to be a thing where you had to do handwritten letters to people in order to get the word out about your business. But nowadays, because of email, you can do electronic letters. So how can you still be the leader in your space, despite the fact that everybody can send 1,000 emails in a day, but not everybody is going to sit down and write out 100 handwritten letters? How can you still separate yourself from everybody else? If you are committed to the outcome, you will find a way to make that commitment come true. Even though you can't do it the same way you did it last year, you can still do it, but you just have to be committed to getting the result, which is I'm going to outperform my competition one way or another. So think about in your industry, things that you used to be able to do that would separate you from the competition, but now because of maybe certain technological advances, now everybody can do that thing that you used to do. Man, you used to do it manually, now everybody can do it automatically, so it's no longer separating you from everyone else. What can you do that would separate you from everybody else? What is that going to be? What pivot do you need to make that would still allow you to be better than everybody else, despite the fact that the geometry of the situation may have changed? All that said, let's recap today's class, which is how to be psychologically competent. And again, this refers to an individual's ability to understand, manage, and respond to their own emotions and the emotions of others in a way that promotes well-being and positive outcomes. And it's about being mentally and emotionally equipped to handle situations with resilience, clarity, and empathy. And a lot of what we talked about here today is how you do this with yourself. Maybe I'll do a future episode on how you do this with others. Number one, get and remain focused on the task at hand while ignoring and avoiding distractions. Good thing about distractions is that they don't exist until you notice them. So if you just stay focused on the task at hand, there's no such thing as a distraction. Number two, find out what the most competent people are already doing and make sure you are capable of doing it as well. This is one area in which it makes sense to pay attention to what other people are doing. You should not make this a normal habit of paying attention to other people's stuff, but there are times when you should, and this is one of them, what I just told you. Number three, keep your sword and skills sharp and never fall asleep at the wheel. Again, this is a piece of your core competency is you need to stay good at the things in which you are already good. It is not okay to have been good and no longer be good while still drawing a check and still trying to do the job that you used to do. You can't be getting worse out here. All right, if you're out here getting worse, you're doing the opposite of working on your game. I don't know what you want to call that, but it ain't working on your game if you're getting worse. You should always be getting better. And I use sports as an example here because it's most obvious in sports because the body erodes. But most of you, the kind of work that you're doing, are you using your brain? Your brain doesn't get worse. Your brain does not get worse the way that you lose your vertical jump, like Michael Jordan or myself. All right, so there's no excuse for you getting worse. All right, there's no reason why it should be happening. All that said, link down below for getting into my text community when we send those texts out again. Work on your game, university.com to work with me directly. You have me as your direct coach. Work on your game. Dre, all